and appreciate all of you being here. And I'll also apologize that we serve on multiple committees, so if I ask questions that have already been asked and answered, I apologize. I also want to thank Chairman DeFazio and Ranking Member Graves for having this hearing, because I do believe that infrastructure is a key component in our ability to fight climate change, and having this hearing is so important. As I mentioned, I'm from California. California is known for many things, including its traffic. In fact, 16.9% of California's roads are in poor condition, 6.2% of our bridges are deficient, 53% of our dams are at high risk. So we recognize how important it is to have the interaction of the federal government, work with states and local municipalities in addressing these issues. I want to read a couple facts with you and then get into some questions. It's shown that personal cars are unused 95% of the time, so a wasting asset 95% of the time. In densely populated cities like Los Angeles, 15% of urban land is used for parking, yet estimates by 2035 is that parking spaces will decline by 5.7 million square meters. 90% of, if we get to a point where we actually have 90% driverless cars, would result in $447 billion in savings and productivity. So if we assume for a minute that we had level 5 automation supporting high levels of autonomous vehicles, we had ride sharing, we had mobility on demand, as you mentioned, Mr. Miller, how is that going to impact, this is an open question for all of you, infrastructure design? Because if population is expected to grow by your respective cities by 25% in the next 25 years, that doesn't mean we need 25% increase in the highways and so on if we have these. So I'm just curious how you guys are working this into your long-term planning for infrastructure.
Well, we're considering and actually have been implementing flexible plans for some of that infrastructure. You know, it's my dream one day that we've built our last structured parking garage at some point. But as we build those structures, we're also considering future use in them, knowing that there's some time off. But it also really depends. I mean, and there's a great potential for urban recapture, and we know we have a great need for housing and things like that in our urban communities. But how we build the transition phase between where we are today and a more multimodal and perhaps autonomous future is very much in the balance. And that's why we're working towards better land use coordinated with housing and transportation, and also including public transportation.
Just to add to that, one of the things that we're hoping to see is more flexibility in the funding that comes to us to allow us to adapt to these things. A specific example, we're building bus rapid transit on the east side of the Central Puget Sound area. The suburban mayors along that route come to the Sound Transit Board that I sit on and beg for more park and ride. Give us more park and ride, give us more park and ride. 50,000 plus a space to build those. The best park and ride is your own garage. If we could invest money in working with the private sector, working with labor and public transit to get people from their home to the transit center, right, and leave their car at home, we would be better off.
You'd solve that problem.
That land could be used for housing at the transit center instead of parking cars.
And I know that's a whole other topic, and you started to touch on that as well, the intersection of affordable housing and transportation. I also want to ask you, too, there's always a large debate about how to fund infrastructure needs, and whether it's a gasoline tax or miles traveled. And you know, when we talk about miles traveled and congestion pricing, and with the growing use of ride share, ride apps, and so on, don't we, and there's always this question, can we even measure miles traveled? And I believe we can right now to a large degree with certain aspects of what we are seeing in these developing technologies and these ride share techniques. Is that being discussed at your level on how to use those existing applications to help monitor miles traveled and use that as a tax base?
How to measure it is being discussed. A more interesting discussion is who measures it and who shares it. We as an agency, I have 9,000 sensors around Seattle alone measuring traffic volumes and traffic speeds. I know that data. We know that data. I don't have the technical expert. We know that data. We know how it's been generated. We know the problems with it. We have private sector entities that are creating data from different places. We don't know as much about the black box that they use to turn that data into information. As this all evolves, a place where we could use some federal guidance, some federal support is what are the relationships? What data gets shared? How does it get shared? How are trade secrets protected? If the public sector enables this to happen on its system, what do we get back from the private sector in terms of the data streams that they collect? It's not just us at the DOT or the city or the county. There are lots of players in that. So what we measure is important, who measures it, and how we get access to that information is critically important.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank